doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of On the Line. Today I'm going to give off the video to William Young again for part 2 on dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. William Young is an expert. He leads in the field. He has books in the market. A great book right off the bat is When Home Becomes a Housing Unit. Very relatable to this field in corrections. But the key to this video that I'm going to show you from William Young is that this can't just be turned off. You can't just leave the profession and it's all well and good. We learn to rationalize this behavior. And for many, they see it as being irrational, but we see it as rational. And William Young is going to hit home with some real life experience that comes from him, inside his heart, telling his story. And it's definitely worth hearing. Go ahead, Will.
In corrections, one of the crazy things that we say, one of our responses to our fellow officers that we deem weak or unfit to carry on in the profession after they've dealt with a traumatic event, or when the weight of wearing the badge seems to be too much for them, is we just simply tell them that maybe they're not cut out for corrections, maybe the job isn't for them, and maybe they should go find another line of work. But here's the fun part. When you witness a traumatic event, when you are suffering and trying to process a traumatic event, you don't get to just leave that in your locker when you leave, right? Is there anybody out there that honestly thinks that if you walk away from the profession, you're able to walk away from your demons? You're able to walk away from those things that are hindering you, that are haunting you? Man, I hope not. If it was that simple, combat veterans wouldn't have a problem, right? They could leave all of that death and destruction overseas, right? Okay, so if that's not a good enough example for you, try reading or researching the hundreds of stories about police officers and firefighters and correctional officers that have retired, that end up taking their own lives because of the things that they suppressed, because of the critical incidents that they compartmentalized while they were on the job, because of their refusal to acknowledge and to recognize that the job, the profession that they chose to do damaged them a little bit. I'm going to share a couple of stories with you, a couple of first-hand accounts that it is not just as simple as walking away from the profession. For me, one of the things that triggers me is when I go to call somebody on the phone. I pick up the phone and I go to call somebody and they don't answer. This is really amplified when I try to call like my wife or somebody that I am really close to, right? That I really care about. And so when I call them and they don't answer the phone, my initial reaction is not to assume that my wife's phone is in the bottom of her purse in the car and she doesn't hear it ring, right? My initial reaction, what goes through my mind, is that my wife is dead, that she's been in some sort of a car accident or something worse has happened, right? And I know that's from the days that I worked at the coroner's office, that I worked for the mortuary transport company, because I spoke to hundreds of family members who were crying and screaming and told me that they just got off the phone with their loved one, that they just talked to their dad or their brother or their sister or their husband or their wife just a little bit ago. And now I'm pulling them out of a car wreck. Now I'm placing them on the embalming table. Right, so when I make a phone call and that person doesn't answer, I freak out. And I try to call again. And if that person doesn't answer again, I freak out again. And my body starts having this reaction, this mild panic attack, until that person calls me back, until I know that they're okay. It's a unreasonable reaction to somebody's not answering their phone, but that's what happens, right? And I haven't picked up a body for 15 years. Maybe longer now, 16 years. But that's what happens, right? Let me share another story with you. And this is a better one. This is a better one, right? If you still think that you can quit corrections or quit law enforcement or quit nursing and you could go work at a job where you're not going to have to clean up any blood, you're not going to have to fight anybody, you're not going to have to do any of the, matter of fact, you just push paper for a living. If you think that these things are not going to follow you, let me share another story with you. My son, who's in the military, was back home over the holidays, and I was going to take him to the airport in the morning. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was going to get up, gonna take him to the airport. Well, I woke up, I got myself a cup of coffee. I didn't hear him stirring downstairs, so I went downstairs. Now, I went downstairs. I went into his room. His lights were on, the door was open, and his bag was packed, sitting on his bed. He wasn't there. Now, I want you to think just for a second what would happen to you if you opened the door to your child's room. He's an adult now, but you open the door to their room and they're not there. And they're supposed to be there. And everything is staged, right? Everything is, the lights on, the room's clean, the bed's made, the bag's packed right in the middle of the thing. What would you assume? Go ahead, answer. Probably not what I assumed. See, in my mind, I was back to my funeral home days. I was back to the first crime scene that I ever walked in on. I have been in hundreds of homes where a person who has taken their own life has cleaned their house, has laid out their pills, has left notes for their friends and family member, who has given away pets, who has closed their life so they could leave it. So here I am, 4 o'clock in the morning, cup of coffee in my hand, standing in my son's room that looks perfectly staged. And I panic. Now, my son has never given me a reason to feel like he would ever do something like that. There are no signs, there are no symptoms. But that's not how this thing works, right? It's not about him, it's about what's going on in my brain. It's about what I stuffed way back in the attic of my mind, right? So where a normal person would probably just turn around, go upstairs, get their phone, give them a call and see where they're at, I didn't do that. See, in my mind, I knew exactly what was going on. And so I walked to his closet. I walked to his closet and I got ready to open it. And in my head, I saw somebody hanging behind the door. And I opened the closet door and there was nobody there. Of course there was nobody there, right? There was a logical explanation for where my son was, but I hadn't got that far yet. And so what do you think I did then? I opened the closet, he wasn't there. What do you think I did then? What would you have done? I turned around and walked to another closet and repeated the same process, and my stomach was in knots, my pulse was racing, my breath was shallow. And I opened every closet door in that basement. And every time I opened the door, all the people that I've seen hanging in my life flashed before my eyes. And I started walking up the steps. He's not in the basement. He's not hanging in any of the closets. Started walking up the steps, and my wife sent me a text and she said, "Hey, is he here?" I don't know. Let me see if the car's here. And so I walked to the garage, and you know what? You know what I thought was behind that garage door? Go ahead. Yeah. I thought I was going to open that garage door and see somebody hanging from an extension cord in the middle of the garage. Now, do you know why I thought that? Because I've been in that situation several times. That's why. Oh, wait a minute, but I quit that job. I haven't seen somebody hanging in, I don't know, forever. Isn't that supposed to just go away? No. So I opened the garage door, and guess what? There was nothing there. And the vehicle wasn't there, and he texted me, he said, Dad, I ran to the gas station real quick. I had to grab something to drink. I'll be home in 3 minutes. And I was fine. Those type of things stay with us for a long time, regardless if we quit the profession or not. So do you see how unproductive it is and how dangerous it is to simply just tell somebody to get another job, to push them aside, to discount their dilemma and wash your hands of them? Intrusive thoughts are no joke, man. These tiny little cracks are no joke. I spoke to a friend of mine that retired from corrections. He worked corrections 24 years. And we were eating lunch the other day, and he was talking to me about a situation he had at work. He works in a cubicle now. And he said a couple of loud bangs went off. And before he realized what he was doing, he had jumped up out of his desk. He had grabbed the fire extinguisher that was hanging on the wall by his desk, and he was running toward the source of the sound. He didn't even know what the sound was. He didn't even know what was happening. It could have been a ladder falling. It could have been anything. But because he was trained, because of his past experiences, not only did his body react, but he physically got up out of his chair and started running. And he was halfway down the hall. Can you imagine this? Imagine you're a millennial or just an office worker, right? A polo-wearing, doctor-wearing office worker. And you're just sitting there pushing your papers around, and all of a sudden your coworker, your big kind of crazy-haired coworker, comes running down the hall with a fire extinguisher. What would you think? I think the guy's losing his mind. And he said, I don't even know how I got to that point. I just reacted. And then he talks about some other things, some dreams that he has, some nightmares. And he explains that a lot of the things that he's going through now, that he's thinking about now, that he's processing now, he never thought about when he worked corrections, when he was in it every single day. And that's real. When we're running and gunning and the lights are on, we don't have time to process all of that stuff because we have something else we have to get to. But the notion that this all goes away when we stop working the profession is ludicrous. Because as soon as our support leaves, as soon as the life goes out, and we're sitting there in silence, that's when these things sneak up on us. So I'm urging you to talk to somebody. If you have been through a traumatic event, and it doesn't matter if anybody else thinks it was a traumatic event, if it bothers you, if it has stuck with you, if it is something you haven't been able to leave behind, go talk to somebody. Get some help. Okay, quitting, leaving the environment, leaving the profession is not going to make those things go away. And if you're having those sort of issues with the things that you've seen, you shouldn't try to handle them yourself. You need to talk to somebody. Talk to a friend or a counselor or a priest or your neighbor over the fence or your wife, somebody. Talk to somebody. Get some help. And if you're one of those people that are a corrections isn't for you kind of people, maybe you should get a different job kind of person, you need to understand that just because a person leaves, just because they're no longer employed with the department, doesn't mean that they're better. It just means that you don't have to deal with them anymore. And that's not a way to care for your brother or sister. That's not a way to back them up, to show concern, right? To watch their six, right? Just because you don't have the mental toughness, the emotional fortitude to deal with that kind of stuff, doesn't mean that you should shun them because they want to. All right, guys, I hope that helps. Until next time, be smart, stay safe, stay sane, and we'll talk soon.